Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and today we're going to be talking about speaking and stuttering. And we have here the mayor of West Miami, Mayor Eric Diaz-Padron, and a speech pathologist. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Malorie Perez-Montoya. Thank you both for being here.
No, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So a couple of weeks ago, we were together, and somehow the subject came up about how we can help other people. And you brought up some of the things you had been dealing with as a young man. So why don't you tell us about that experience in speaking?
Sure, and I was on an affiliate podcast here at the community newspaper, and I had mentioned that I never thought that I would run for office because of my past, my speech impediment that I grew up with and was always challenging, and how through therapy I was able to overcome that, and now be in professions and rooms where obviously I have to speak quite a bit publicly and you know, overcome that impediment. So you asked me after that if I would be willing to have an open conversation on that, and of course I'm willing to kind of dispose of any sort of things that people think about stuttering and see if we can help someone along.
So you're the mayor of the city of West Miami.
Yes.
Weren't you like the youngest guy around for a while?
For a while, I'm like I said, I get older every day, so it's a little rough. But yes, I started when I was 23 on the commission, and I was elected a mayor when I was 26, 27. And
you have a real job. Not that that's not real, but you have something that produces income. What is that?
I'm an attorney and a consultant.
Wait, so
yeah.
Let me see if I got it right, folks. A guy that used to stutter is a lawyer, and he's the mayor of the city of West Miami. Congratulations on that. And so we have a speech pathologist. So Malorie, why don't you tell us, number one, how you got into this field, and two, why?
So I got into this field, I was searching before college kind of what I was interested in, and I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I liked working with kids. I considered nursing, but the medical aspect of it kind of grossed me out. And my younger cousin actually went to a speech therapist. He's diagnosed with autism. And I went with him for a few sessions, and I was like, this is so cool. It's a person basically just playing with a child. They're having fun. They're playing games.
How old were you at that point?
I was probably 17. Mm-hmm. It was before entering university. And I thought, I can do this. It looks so fun. And I went back to the same office. I shadowed for a few weeks, and I knew right away this is what I want to do. I started my, speech career at UCF. I graduated undergrad and master's there, and then I just pursued it full time.
So that was 17 when you decided, I'm going to go into speech. But before that, you were thinking about nursing, and what are some of the other fields that came to you?
Really just nursing. I knew from the beginning I wanted to work with children, and I was really interested in neonatal nursing, I remember, because I loved, being able to help little premature babies. But I realized you have to go through actual nursing school to do that, and I said no way.
Wow, what a surprise.
Yes.
So your specialty now is in pediatric?
In pediatrics, correct.
That's a big deal to do that, because you recognize that you have their whole lives in front of them.
Yeah, and that's the amazing part of it, is that you know that you're making a difference, and it's something that the child's going to carry on for the rest of their life.
So let's talk about your feelings when you were stuttering at your worst. What was going on in your personality and your brain, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I look at it now as a blessing, because as a kid, I was sort of seen as the shy kid or not talking as much, and because naturally, the least you talk, the less you can have an episode or stimulating episode, right? So those kind of things carry over now very positively, because I learned to listen a lot more to talk. I've learned to be a lot more concise, because I cut down straight to the point to avoid situations where I would stutter. So those things are actually very helpful now. But yeah, it's a situation where, growing up, you don't raise your hand in class. You don't go out of your way to have conversations. And it's a struggle. And when you overcome that, and frankly, when you overcome the fear of that more than the therapy, when you overcome and have, being able to actually speak without worry, that's fantastic. But overcoming the fear and that it's actually not a big deal is also a big part of the battle.
So Malorie, as you've been dealing with kids of all different ages, the ones that expressed it to you, what do they feel when they start stuttering? And as you're saying beforehand, how do you help them overcome or deal with and manage that concern or fear?
So one thing I always tell kids off the bat is that even a person who doesn't stutter on the regular gets stuck with his or her speech. For example, you probably get stuck on a few words, even live on the air a few times, right?
Of course.
If I'm thinking about something at the end of a day and I'm trying to explain a story and I'm so tired, right? I get stuck on my words. I forget what I want to say. So even people who are not diagnosed as a person who stutters, they still stutter in their everyday life. And that's bringing that to their attention and making them aware, like, hey, I'm not alone, and even other people do this as well, is a big factor. But a lot of the behaviors that Eric described is a lot of the things that I see, like no child wants to raise their hand in class or read out loud. So it's just making them aware that it happens to everybody. Everybody gets stuck. And the main thing that you want to let the child know is you're speaking for a reason, right? Either you're called on to read, you're talking to your friend. The most important thing is that you get your message across to the listener. If a mistake happens, everybody makes mistakes and it's fine, but just pick up and keep on going.
So, and how in life do we get to that point where it's like, okay, let's put that on pause, all right, and let's move on to something else? When I was in college, an English professor came over to me, Michael, you're struggling. I said, yes, I am. And she goes, come on, we've got a special class. I go, and it's her office, which is a L-shaped desk. I said, where's the class? It's just you and me. That was a long time ago. And she said, what's the problem? I said, when I start writing, I get stuck. I pull the paper out of the typewriter and I throw it away. Anything else? She said, this is what I want you to do. Next time you get stuck, stop, pause, take a breath, and start again. Because if you don't acknowledge that you're stuck, and we would call that writer's block, speaker's block, speaker's block. It happens all the time where you go, oops, we're not there. So tell us about your experience as a young man or boy to where it was really embarrassing for you, and maybe one of those moments would say, okay, because of this, I'm going to do something.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say there was a specific one moment, right? But I'll tell you situations, right? So a lot of things people don't know. Stutterers have a harder time on the phone. Stutterers have a harder time ordering at restaurants. That's like a very unique point where, for some reason,
Stutter?
Yes.
Okay.
True.
So I lived but and oftentimes, you know, there are different people have different stutters. So mine was when starting specific words, right? So you would avoid certain words that started in certain letters, right?
And you knew what they were.
I knew generally what they were, but you know, sometimes there would be off ones. But things like the start of W were a big problem for me. And what would oftentimes happen, the most embarrassing times would be when I would be in a conversation with someone and I would have to pretend to forget things, right? I would sit there and I would pretend to not remember what I was saying or not remember a name because I couldn't get it out, right? So I would sit there and I would say, hold on, let me think of what the person, and I knew what it was. It's just, I couldn't get the word out. And that sort of stuff that, you know, you don't see, like, no one knows what's happening, right? But internally, it's brewing, it's a problem.
So even if somebody's not a stutterer, and if you watch these news broadcasts, they're saying people's names that they'll probably never say again, and it's never pronounced the same, because I've checked at different stations. Imagine the pressure that they're under to get that thing correct, and how many times we just avoid that type of thing so we don't have that. So why don't you give us an example where some of the kids have said, I can't say that word, so I'm going to use something else. How do you do that?
So, I mean, that happens a lot. Like he said, you, as a person who stutters, like Eric mentioned, you kind of feel internally when the stutter is going to happen. You know that there's certain sounds or certain words that you get stuck saying. So you anticipate it coming. So like he said, your brain is thinking at the same time that you're talking. So you know, like, okay, this word is coming up. And the child, you can even kind of see it. Again, me in my profession that I study this, you can kind of see when the block is coming and when the child is going to switch over to something else. But for a person who doesn't study it and doesn't know, again, they might just see the person pause and maybe think, like he said, oh, they just lost their train of thought or they forgot what they're going to say.
So you're saying they know it's coming. Either they heard it or they've seen it and here it comes. Okay, what am I going to do when that moves from over here to here? So what is that when they start to stutter, or do they just skip the whole subject of that?
So it depends. If the person who's speaking who has a stutter decides to actually try and, you know, produce the word or sound that's coming that they have a hard time with, a stutter might occur or it might not. Or they can kind of go the route of just skipping over the word, using a different word instead to avoid it altogether.
That's common.
That's common, yes.
And in Miami, it's very common. It's like, I don't know that word over there. And especially if it's Spanglish in there, and I look at it and go, all right, I know if I go to pronounce the word that it's going to be wrong. So I don't want it to be wrong. So I'm not going to say it. So even though I don't consider myself a stutterer, but I'm looking at a word, and if I'm going to have to struggle to say it, and it's going to be bad, all right? So I understand how we can shift some of that responsibility. We'll just cut that out. You're a lawyer. What type of lawyer are you?
I'm a general practitioner, so I do a little bit of everything.
So you have new people all the time going before you as in your law practice, and then all the time as your position as mayor.
Every hour of the night and morning.
Okay. So what is it like when 30 to 49% of the people that show up or that don't like you, right, because they voted for the other guy or gal, right? What's that like, and how does that affect your communication?
Well, I think this is where I'd like to just make a segue on and dispel some notion on, because there's a situation where stutterers stutter when they're nervous, right, or confronted with something, but it's not necessarily, that's not the reason they stutter, right? The underlying reason they stutter is not nervousness or because they got caught off guard or anything like that. And, some of the most confident people I've ever known were stutterers. And in a program that I did in Virginia for 2 weeks, people in that program with me were some of the toughest stutterers I've ever seen. Like they couldn't get through a sentence, and they were married with kids and jobs, things that I couldn't imagine doing, right? But they were just so confident. And I can't imagine them being in a situation where they stuttered more because they were nervous, right? So it's just dispelling that thing. So in dealing with people that come, I mean, at this point it's so different. I've been able to hone my skills. That's what it is. You don't never stop being a stutterer, right? Because I don't stutter in this interview doesn't mean that I don't stutter. It's just I've been able to hone my skills and on the movement of the muscles of the mouth to make sure that I don't have an episode, right? But it's always a constant thought.
So Malorie, so how do you teach the student, the client, to be aware of that and what they need or should do in order to manage their stuttering?
So like Eric said, it's not something that will ever go away. If you are a true person who stutters, you will stutter for the rest of your life. But again, it's starting off with that awareness. So I work a lot with younger children, and I don't know, Eric, when you started treatment for stuttering, but a lot of times for me, the child is unaware that they stutter, and it's starting at the point where, okay, we have to build awareness that this breakdown in his or her communication is happening. So we start with building awareness, where lots of times I will model for the child a stutter, and I'll ask them, did that speech sound smooth to you, or was it a little bit bumpy? Did I get stuck on any words? And I'll have the child tell me, oh, it was smooth, oh, it was bumpy. So kind of building the awareness that way. And then once they are aware, like, okay, I'm stuttering on these words, these are my problem sounds. And we have kids, I've worked with kids who, a little girl who she would tell me, I stutter on this sound, this sound, this sound, these words are hard for me, this. So
wow.
We have the complete opposites. This could go either way. But once we have that awareness in the child, it's like Eric said, different exercises. We work on breathing, relaxing, kind of, again, awareness of the muscles in the mouth, controlling them, how even the muscles in the mouth are contacting like the palate, the lips, everything.
All that matters.
Yes. And it's going through different techniques with the child and figuring out what works for him or her and what doesn't. So each child is different, and different techniques that we show them may work for them or may not. So it's kind of trial and error. And
Malorie, how do your youngest wind up with you? What has to occur? How do they get to you? Through a school system, the parents, or how does that work?
It could be through the school system. So I work with various schools, and I have good relationships with like the principals and the teachers, and they'll refer me if they see that they have a child in their class who's struggling. Through word of mouth as well. I have a lot of clients who I work with that I see them in their homes, and they refer me to other clients. So it just depends, through pediatricians sometimes as well.
Mayor, so here you are, 27 or 28?
29. I don't want to.
29, I'm sorry. All right. All right. So could you give us at least two exercises that you can do to manage the stuttering?
Yeah, so I'll say, one of the reasons I wanted Malorie here was she's excellent in the pediatric space, something that I wish I would have had back then, I went through a number of therapists growing up, and I was a hard-headed kid, right? So that's where I ended up in a program in Virginia that was fully immersive, 2 weeks. From the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, was just all therapy the entire day. And, some of the things that I learned there, because I had to learn later in life, in high school, junior year, senior year.
Later in life.
Yeah, middle-aged. But it's, it's breaking down the speech down to where you can, when you're about to struggle with a word, being able to ease into it, and, basically avoid the break. So, like I said, I might have mentioned when stutterers don't stutter when they sing, right? So it's a little bit of that principle, right? Is getting it into a rhythm where you don't have that block and break, where it just smooths into words. So that's something that I had to work on. And when I'm getting, so I don't know if you noticed there actually with the W, you smooth into it, right? So it doesn't create a block.
You're talking about from the time you about to think it until you say it is, I don't know, was that a millionth of a second? Are you saying that you sort of anticipate what's going from here to here?
Oh, absolutely. It takes a lot of skill, a lot of practice, but absolutely. I mean, look, I'm not unique. I'm not as good as other people. So you mentioned reporters and their names. John Stossel went through the program that I went through, right? John Stossel had an enormous career in media. He was a stutterer, very big stutterer, and he went through the same therapist that I went through. Obviously, President Biden was a stutterer as well. Obviously, had a very long career in President of the United States. It's very doable, but it does take a lot of practice.
So that process from here to here is different than when you look at something to read and you're going, oh boy, I see what's here. Mm-hmm. And so there's some religious service that I'm involved with every Friday. And I look at it, I'm going to be people around the room. Okay, that's the first paragraph, the second paragraph, third, fourth. So I'm reading my lines before. Mm-hmm. I'm going, okay, which one can I mumble through? And so it's like I look at it and go, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And it's not a matter of stuttering. It's a matter of going, I can't pronounce the word. I don't know what the word is. So you wind up mumbling through there. So are there things that children do to cover their stuttering so that it doesn't appear as though it's there, but it's some other issue?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of avoidance behaviors that they do. And Eric mentioned a few of them. Like he said, for example, the little girl I mentioned that I used to work with, she would be telling me a story and I would see her stop. And she was very good at hiding it, where I'd have to ask her, like, okay, are you stuck or did you really just forget? And lots of times she would admit to me, like, no, I'm stuck. And I'm like, okay, so let's go back to what you were trying to say. I was like, if you can't even say it, write it down for me on the paper. And then we would go, like he said, kind of trying to say the word and smoothing into it.
So Malorie, it's as you pointed out earlier, it's moving the stuff from being hidden out front so there can be a conversation. Mm-hmm. Michael Phelps, the great Olympic swimmer, maybe 5 years ago, 8 years ago, he went on, he said, I'm in therapy, telehealth, right? I saw that as significant. Let's get it up so we can have that conversation. So if you were going to guesstimate how many stutterers there are in the country, what's your guess?
I have the stat. It's about 1%.
Okay, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you probably
5% at the pediatric level.
You know more than I do. Yeah. I do know that the prevalence among boys is higher than amongst girls.
And why is that?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. We have no like direct and definitive answers as to why.
So what happens to the psyche of a very young person when they go, I'm a stutterer and I can hear myself when I'm talking and people are looking at me, the teacher's saying, say it again or whatever it is. What does that do to their psyche?
So again, each kid is different. You can have some kids who have zero care in the world, but for the ones who do, obviously it affects their self-esteem. Like Eric said, you don't want to be talking too long in front of grown-ups or even in front of their peers because they're scared to be made fun of. They're scared to get stuck, to not get their message across, to appear even as if they don't know what they're saying, as if they aren't intelligent because they get stuck and can't get their words out. So it definitely affects them, right? Think of a child who won't want to initiate play with other kids because they can't even ask, hey, can I play with you? Because they get stuck on a sound in that sentence. So it can tend to isolate children more and definitely affect their self-esteem, their confidence, for sure.
So Mayor, tell us about your experience internally when you recognize, hey, I have this speech thing that's going on. So tell us about you.
Yeah, like I said, I was a hard-headed kid, right? So I like to think maybe if I was a little more disciplined as a kid in the therapy sessions, I would have, you know, been able to overcome some of that a little earlier. But again, I went through probably 15 therapists. I was very hard-headed.
They're proud of you now. Don't worry about it.
I was very hard-headed, very hard-headed. But you know, I would say that the challenge is real. But I mean, I have friends that come now to me and say, you know, how can I solve this now? Now they're in their 30s, now they're in their late 20s, and they knew me as a kid, and they know me now, and they see the difference and my speech. So you know, definitely, you know, there needs to be you know, greater conversation on how we can in later life people you know, be able to solve some of these challenges.
You know, I keep referring to mental health because I think that it's important. All of a sudden, a couple of years ago, there was a mental health day. Oh, so you mean it's okay to not feel good all the time? But what is it that a child, let's say, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, should understand so that he can be healthier in his soul?
I think for me and the message I try to push as a therapist is, like I said at the beginning, stuttering happens to anybody, whether you are diagnosed as a person who stutters or are not. It's normal, and you shouldn't be ashamed about it because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody gets stuck in their speech, and it's just about using the strategies you know to pick up and move forward and get your message across.
Certainly there's this comfort in you are not alone.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh my goodness, because everybody says that, you know, there are 20 other thousand people that have this. There's a certain comfort level in that. It's so you don't feel isolated.
Well, that's why when you gave me the idea of coming on here to talk about this, I was, you know, happy to do it because I've always criticized people who later in life, everyone who's ever had a platform overcame something or multiple things in their life, everybody. And stuttering is one of those things that people who end up having a platform choose to hide in the background, right? They never talk about it. I was talking to before the show, I mentioned to you that President Biden, who is a known stutterer now, the National Association of Stuttering wanted him to be an honorary chairman for years when he was a senator, 20, 30 years. And later in life, I guess he realized, hey, it's not embarrassing to say that I stuttered. And he ended up helping them out and making it a more awareness. But I wish he would have done that 30 years ago, right? So everyone has something that they had to overcome, and putting it on the open is only helpful. So I was happy to do so, and it's really important that we do.
What would you like to see happen in public awareness so you can help more people?
In public awareness, like Eric said, I feel like people who do stutter, and especially people who have platforms, celebrities, you know, presidents, anybody with a large platform and a large audience, if they do stutter, I feel like they should come forward and say, hey, this is something that I am going through as well, that I will go through for the rest of my life, but it doesn't define me. Look at me, I have a career, I have these goals, and I'm doing it.
And I think as you get older, you realize that it's not something you should do, it's your responsibility to do that. And so we have 2 minutes left. What I'd like you to do, and you're next, okay, is look right over into that camera, and I want you to think of somebody that's really helped you or somebody that was a mentor, and to thank them by name would be great. And then give a piece of advice to people, especially if they're struggling with issues, including stuttering.
Yeah, so I would say, well, first of all, thank you to the 15 therapists that tried to help me. They were excellent, but they did a great job. I just wasn't the right patient. HCRI, which is based out of Roanoke, Virginia, they ultimately did help me overcome my stuttering. They were excellent. So thank you to Dr. Webster over there and the ACRI crew. And I would say, look, I mean, it's very overcomable once you know all the people who have overcame it, either just over their skills or just have, you know, are blocking and doing great things in their lives. It's not something to be embarrassed about, and it's not something that isn't overcomable. And, you know, I'm testament to that, right? So you can do it.
Malorie, the same for you. Look right into the camera.
And say something.
People that have helped you along your way, maybe it was a mentor, maybe it was a family member, whether they're here or if they passed, and suggestions for people.
So definitely, I have to say thanks to my little cousin who got me in this field to begin with. All the great professors I've had along the way, and even all of my great mentors, Malorie Perez and Kristen Cofino. Thank you guys for kind of making me the therapist I am today. And like I mentioned before, if you are a person who stutters and feel like now is the time to seek help, definitely, contact a speech language pathologist. And we're here to help you, as well as other people and resources in your community. And feel free to reach out and kind of talk about it openly with family, with friends, and kind of let go of the taboo that stuttering is something bad, because it happens to everybody.
Wonderful. Mayor Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Always.
Malorie Perez-Montoya, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we're going to
Thank
look
you.
right into the red camera. And we're going to say thank you very much for joining us. Remember, take care of yourselves and your family. Have a good day.